Day 3 of the 2024 IMF and World Bank annual meetings includes a look at the crucial decade ahead.
The Fiscal Monitor makes the case that public debt risks are elevated and prospects are worse than they look. Kicking the can down the road won't do. Time to act is now. What's the bottom line? Public debt is very high, rising and risky. The time is now to pivot towards a gradual, sustained and people-focused fiscal adjustment.
So we have to take into account that this transition is going to be painful, it's going to be costly, and it might be more difficult.
What is recognized by all is that finance is the enabler of climate action. It's decisions and decision makers who are here in DC right now that hold the levers to those things outside of the process that provide those multipliers from the billions to the trillions.
We can work with each other to further diversify risk, and by coming together for a regional debt for climate swap, which helps all of us because we all have the same date with destiny as small island states, quite frankly.
Hello, I'm Amanda Walker and welcome to IMF Today. Another packed day here at IMF HQ, starting with a topic weighing heavy on the minds of nations around the world, debt. At this morning's Fiscal Monitor press briefing, Fiscal Affairs Department Director Vita Gasper said that public debt risks are elevated and now is the time for countries to get their fiscal houses in order.
Deficits are high and global public debt is very high, rising and risky. Global public debt is projected to go above $100 trillion this year. At the current pace, the global debt to GDP ratio will approach 100% by the end of the decade, rising above the pandemic peak. In most countries, fiscal plans that governments have put in place are insufficient to deliver stable or declining public debt ratios with a high degree of confidence. Additional efforts are necessary. Delaying adjustment is costly and risky. Everywhere, fiscal policy as structural policy can make a substantial contribution to growth and jobs.
Now, Ghana is one country that has made remarkable progress in debt restructuring. Joining me now is that country's Minister of Finance, the Honourable Mohammed Amin Adam. Thank you so much for joining us, Minister. So first of all, just tell us, how did you achieve such progress and what advice would you give to other developing nations when it comes to their own debt challenges?
Well, the debts, when they become unsustainable, hurt the economy, particularly the fiscal impact of debt is quite huge and can constrain your economy from growing. And therefore, as part of our arrangement with the IMF, we decided to restructure our debts to bring our debts to sustainable levels. We started with our domestic debt restructuring, and the sacrifices of our people ensured that we concluded that restructuring with about 95% or more participation. So it was greatly a success. We followed that with the restructuring of our bilateral debt with our bilateral creditors. That was also very successful in a negotiation between us and the Official Creditor Committee for Ghana. And this led to significant savings, debt service relief of about $2.8 billion US. And then following this is our restructuring of the Eurobonds. The Eurobonds, about $13 billion US. That was concluded in the first week of this month. Another great success because we saw over 98% participation in the debt exchange. The benefits we have derived from this so far includes an outright debt cancellation of about $5 billion and another debt service relief of about $4.3 billion. And so between the bilateral creditors and the Eurobonds, you are talking about savings of about $12 billion US. So we think this is a very great success. we are still having an outstanding restructuring with our commercial creditors involving about $2.7 billion. And we are working very hard to conclude that. So far, I can say that we have been pretty successful at our restructuring. The participation has been great, and we see ourselves moving on the path to debt sustainability. Why we succeeded, which other countries need to take into consideration in their restructuring, is number one, what we call fair burden sharing, because we had to do domestic debt exchange, which you haven't seen many countries do. We had to do that first to demonstrate our ability and our capacity to sacrifice the sacrifice of our people in biting part of the bullet before we went out to do the external debt restructuring. And so because of that, the bilateral creditors as well as our Eurobond holders saw Ghana's seriousness and readiness to change by first of all restructuring our domestic debt before coming to them. And so that brought them closer to us, and that helped with the negotiation. You cannot go to creditors and ask them for relief when you are not restructuring your own domestic debt to put your house in order. And so that helped a lot. The second reason was simplicity. The simplicity in the sense that we went for a very simple structure, what we call the plain vanilla structure, focusing on the restructuring of the principal and the coupons, as opposed to state contingent instruments, which we think is very complex. And so the simplicity of the structure that we negotiated also helped us to conclude the negotiation. And we did it in record time, about 9 months compared to 2 years used by other countries to restructure their Euro bonds. And the third reason is the transparency. Transparency in the sense that we provided all the data. We did not keep any data away or any information away from the creditors. They asked all the questions. We published all the documents. And we are even committed to further transparency in terms of debt transparency. We are committed to publishing our debt levels on a quarterly basis, have every a year as well, so that everybody can track how we are managing our debts.
So you're in a good position now. How do you make sure that you stay there?
Yes, we have to stay that, first of all, because the domestic debt we did was a very painful exercise. And our own people,
what is the experience of living with that kind of debt?
Yeah, it was a very
impact
painful exercise. Very painful exercise because people did not expect that. And so to have taken the people of Ghana through this painful exercise has meant that they had to sacrifice beyond what many people could do. And because of that, they are demanding fiscal discipline. They are demanding fiscal stability. And that is why it will be very difficult to go back to the era of unsustainable debt. The second measure we're putting in place is the implementation of far-reaching structural reforms, to build our resilience. And one of the structural reforms relate to the fiscal responsibility legislation. We are seeking amendments to the existing fiscal responsibility legislation to impose debt limits on ourselves. And we are also putting in place a fiscal council that will ensure compliance with the fiscal rules. The Fiscal Council is supposed to be an independent council which will, outside the government, monitor our progress in terms of debt management, in terms of how much we borrow, how we repay, to ensure that we do not go beyond the limit that we are imposing on ourselves.
Okay, Minister, I know you've had 7 meetings today, so I'm going to let you go and relax. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck with the rest of the week.
Thank you.
Barbados is undertaking an innovative approach to tackling debt. In essence, the debt for climate swap allows a creditor to forgive or refinance some of what a country owes in exchange for a commitment by the country to invest in climate-related initiatives. I asked Prime Minister Mia Mottley what motivated Barbados to go for this initiative.
In 2022, we did a debt for nature swap, where in repurchasing our debt and reissuing it at lower interest rates, we were able to find savings to finance a marine conservation trust for 15 years, and that went well. And we said, okay, the truth is that we have some lumpy investments to make us climate resilient, but because of the tight fiscal anchor that we have in our program, it's not going to be easily achievable without thinking outside of the box. And that immediately led us to say, look, if we were to be able to do a debt for climate swap, we could literally, through the savings, repurpose the existing sewage facility, which only separates solids but doesn't do the adequate treatment for replenishment of the aquifer or for irrigation, for agriculture, for non-leafy vegetables. With that in mind, we also recognize that in treating the water, we would be continuing to protect our nearshore environment on the south coast of Barbados. And therefore, it became a no-brainer. The question is, who would be able to do it with us? And that is why we realized that if we tried to rely on any one body in particular, it wouldn't be possible. As we learned with the debt for nature swap, the IDB can't do the whole thing on its own, and therefore they needed another partner. The European Investment Bank is good at giving the guarantees because that's partly what they do well, but they had never gone into this space before. The private sector entities who come to the table to provide the domestic currency debt was a private sector entity, in this case it is CIBC Caribbean. And then none of this could work without some level of grant and really concessional capital, and this is where Green Climate Fund came in. So once we realized that there was an appetite on the part particularly of the IDB and the Green Climate Fund and the EIB, then it became easier to do the project. And of course the public procurement process then brought the private sector player as well to the table. So one, our fiscal situation being challenged. Two, the need for lumpy investments to be able to drive resilience, because Barbados is a water scarce country, but we also depend on tourism, and if our coastal environment is impacted, we're going to have problems. And if we don't deal with those while at the same time addressing food security, we have other problems. So the combination and confluence of needs, as well as the partnership possible from the interested parties, that's why we're here today.
So how do you monitor progress on these initiatives to make sure that you're delivering both on climate resilience and on the broader economic development goals?
The documents are actually quite complex in terms of what they require from us, in terms of monitoring at the level of the institutions and what they require from us on an annual basis. But separately from that, for the purposes of my own population, our Ministries of Health and our Ministry of Water will be the ones doing the testing also at the same time to make sure that we're not only doing what we require institutionally and structurally for the debt for climate swap, but we're also making sure that the underlying issues with the treatment of the water and the water being used by our population will also be continuously monitored. So we don't see this as an examination of the success of the project, but an examination equally of the success of what the project was designed to achieve in the underlying circumstances with our water.
So when it comes to neighbouring, sure, and when it comes to neighbouring Caribbean countries who are considering beefing up their own climate resilience, what have you learned that you would offer in terms of advice? Would this model work across the region?
It's going to require partnership. This cannot be done because you're breaking new ground. And whenever you're breaking new ground, people are worried about risk. So being able to have the requisite partners at the table who can help de-risk the project is absolutely critical. Being able to identify an investment resilience plan that is national, so it's not an ad hoc project that you've taken, but people can see where it fits in the overall scheme to become resilient. And then, of course, one of the things that, as I said earlier today, that we need to look at is instead of limiting it to a debt for climate swap at the national level, because we have, like the European Union, a community of economic interests with the CARICOM, Caribbean Community, otherwise known as CARICOM, we can work with each other to further diversify risk, and by coming together for a regional debt for climate swap, which helps all of us because we all have the same date with destiny as small island states, quite frankly. Although there are 3 member states in CARICOM that are continental, Guyana, Suriname and Belize, but they're still Caribbean countries, and they equally have issues as well that are of concern that they're affected by the climate crisis. So I do think that there's a wonderful opportunity for us to scale up and to go wider. This one we've done for climate resilience, but if you recall, both in the Bridgetown Initiative and in the 4 Ps, we're not only fighting for climate, we're fighting for people, because we can win the climate battle and lose the battle with people. So people and planet are important, and this model allows us to deal not just with debt for climate, we can do debt for SDGs, debt for social, other things that are innovative. Is this the only instrument? It isn't. but is this a necessary instrument to complement all of the things, particularly as middle-income vulnerable countries who have limited access to concessional funding, who are not IDA-based? This is one of the key components that we're using to break new ground and to create the elbow room, the space that will allow people to benefit, because at the end of the day, it's not about finance, and that's just a fuel. It's about making it easier for us to become resilient and to save lives and livelihoods.
Okay. Prime Minister, thank you for your insights.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much.
your time.
All the best.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Prime Minister Mottley participated in the first of 3 Climate Voices events during these meetings. The other 2 focused on the critical decade ahead and the shift to green jobs and the future of work. And in that second conversation, there was a lot of debate about the role women will play moving forward.
Without action, the green transition can actually exacerbate gender inequality. So policies that really foster STEM education and promote mentorship programs are really key for let's say, getting women into the green labor market.
We need to support work and the transition, also geographical mobility, or support the communities that will be affected by the job losses by allowing them to reinvent themselves into more greener type of activities.
Women, in general, face really trade-off between education, work, family, due to paid and unpaid labor demand. So measures that help, like access to finance, measures to provide childcare, quality and accessible childcare, flexible work programs, and parental leave. These are measures that can go a long way to help and support women to enter the labor force.
Now, it's no exaggeration when I say that thousands of people are filling these buildings this week. Ministers, central bank governors, delegates and their staff are here for the open events, as well as hundreds of closed-door meetings and ministerial. And while they are all well-versed in economics, not all of them speak the same language. IMF Today's Golda Lee Bruce takes us behind the scenes with the IMF's deputy lead interpreter, Mariano de Anton, to find out what it takes to get them all on the same page.
Here we are in one of the IMF's interpretation booths, and my colleague Mariano has agreed to show us around as we demystify some aspects of the annual meetings. Welcome, Mariano.
Thank you very much.
So maybe we can just jump right in. How many meetings in the annual meetings require simultaneous interpretation?
All right, so we're talking about a total of approximately 400 meetings taking place both at the IMF and the World Bank. And we manage interpretation services for all those events, ranging from ministerial conferences like the IMFC to press briefings, other outreach events, and hundreds of bilaterals.
And how many languages are we talking about, and how many people are we talking about?
All right, so we provide interpretation in, well, obviously English, which is the working language of the fund and the World Bank, and also into French, Spanish, Arabic, Portuguese, Russian, and Chinese. And we gather a team of approximately 90 to 95 interpreters, including staff interpreters, freelance interpreters, and interpreters on loan from international organizations such as the Council of Europe, WTO, OECD, and the African Development Bank.
So show us around your house. I see some consoles here. I guess this is the main tool of your craft, so to speak. How does that work? How do they work?
Okay, so this is, yes, the standard simultaneous interpretation equipment and interpretation console. And it has the buttons, controls, and functions necessary to provide simultaneous interpretation, such as the mic to turn it on and off. The output language channels, that is to say the languages that the interpreters need to interpret into, so they can toggle between English and their booth language. In this case, we see that it's Arabic. And also on this side, we have the incoming audio channels. And that includes the floor channel, which allows interpreters to hear, well, what is being spoken on the floor. And also a very cool feature, which is called relay in the interpretation profession. And this is used for multilingual conferences involving unusual language combinations. For example, let's say English, Chinese, and Arabic. For interpretation to take place between Chinese and Arabic, the relay feature allows interpreters to use English as a bridge. So if remarks are being delivered in Chinese, the Chinese interpreters will interpret into English, and the Arabic interpreters will go to the relay channel to hear the English interpretation provided by the Chinese booth interpreters, and with that they'll be able to interpret into Arabic.
So this must require a really high level of concentration because you're listening and speaking basically at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's correct, yes. That's what simultaneous interpretation involves.
And so I guess your training allows you to do this, and over time you become better at it.
Exactly. Well, our interpreters are highly experienced and trained, and it's their bread and butter. So yes, it's second nature for them. Yes.
And I see here in the booth that there are 3 consoles. Is it that a team works together? Is it one person here? Is it 3?
So interpreters normally work in pairs, and they take turns every 30 minutes. And for long meetings, we have teams of 3 interpreters. That's why you see 3 consoles.
And you, Mariana, I know that you're managing the team at this moment, but as an interpreter, how does one prepare for a session?
Well, so first interpreters are, as I said before, highly experienced working for the fund and the World Bank. So they draw upon their years of experience and knowledge to provide the highest standard of interpretation services. And also they have to study. They have to study a lot. And that's why we provide them with background materials that we request for meeting organizers for interpreters to be able to prepare, to become acquainted with the terminology to be used, and that's how interpreters prepare for a meeting.
Thank you so much, Mariano. I know that you and your team are in the middle of a very, very busy week, so we really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We have hundreds of delegates coming from around the world, stakeholders from different countries, and they speak different languages, and that's why we need simultaneous interpretation.
What a great insight there to a crucial aspect of these meetings. But not everything this week is about business. Music filled the air on H Street between the 2 IMF headquarters buildings. It's part of an initiative to give participants at these meetings a taste of Washington, D.C. Today there was a jazz trio and several food trucks around lunchtime. I wish someone had told me. I missed that. Maybe tomorrow. Now, looking ahead to tomorrow, the day begins with IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva's press briefing on her global policy agenda. Then our regional press briefings begin with the Asia and Pacific, Middle East and Central Asia and European departments. There's a conversation on the Global Public Finance Partnership. And here in the atrium, it's the debate on the global economy. Well, that's all for IMF today. I'm Amanda Walker. We'll leave you tonight with another look at some of those memorable moments from Wednesday. See you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching.